Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Eugene and this channel is dedicated to teaching of programming and software development. In this lesson, we are going to learn about the switch statement in C#. This will be a relatively short and simple lesson, but it will give you a powerful tool to accomplish different tasks. In modern C#, there is also something called a switch expression, which is a more compact way to write some switch logic. However, in this lesson, we focus on the classic switch statement. Consider you are writing a program that asks the user for some input and decides what to do depending on the input of the user. We already know how to get data from the console, this is already not a problem for us, and then after the user enters his input, we may have multiple options. For example, we write a program that performs calculations based on what the user chooses, while the options are add, subtract, multiply, divide, and modulo. Of course, we can do it with multiple if statements, but this becomes not readable when we have long chains of if-else. It gets hard to maintain or extend when there are many if statements, which can easily lead to mistakes. As you can see in the example, we have a separate if statement for every option. This approach works fine when there are just a few options, but when there are many, this becomes really hard to manage. To solve the problem of multiple if-else statements, there is another statement named switch. A switch statement allows us to choose one action from many possible options based on the value of a single variable. Notice that a switch evaluates a single expression and compares it to a constant value. The syntax of a switch statement is the following. As you can see, we tell C# that we want to check the value of the variable in parentheses, and then we list the options that the variable has using cases. We start with the switch keyword and then the variable in parentheses. Every case starts with a case keyword after which we have the value that the variable can have. Every case statement ends with a colon after which we write the commands to run if the variable has that value. In the end of the case, we have a break statement. You already saw the break statement in the context of loops, where we stopped the loop completely. Here we do the same. The moment a break statement is reached, we exit the switch statement. Basically, every case should have a break statement. However, there is a special case when it's possible not to add a break statement, but this works just in case multiple variable options have the same implementation. In this case, multiple cases will be written directly, one after another. As you can see, after the cases, we have a default statement. This will be executed if the variable did not match any of the cases. Default is optional, but very useful. If there is no default and none of the cases match, the switch statement simply does nothing. As you can see, this code does the same as what the if-else statements did previously, but this time we have multiple advantages over if-else statements. First, the code is cleaner and more readable than multiple if statements. Also, it is easy to add more cases or make any changes. And the structure of the switch statement helps preventing mistakes because each case is clearly separated. As a beginner, you might wonder when you should use if-else and when to use switch. Generally speaking, use switch when you compare the same variable to many constant values. In contrast, use if-else when conditions are more complex or not just equality checks. Now, let's go to VS Code to see some examples. Alright, now I'm in VS Code and let's write a program that gets two numbers from the user and an operation and performs that operation on the numbers. And to do that, we are going to use the switch statement. All right, so to begin with, let's ask the user for the first number. All right. String. Yeah, so we are getting from the user a string, so I'm going to store it in a string variable, and then we'll need to convert it to an integer. So I'll call it num1 as str, which means string, and we'll read it. All right. Then let's do the same for the second number. All right. Now, after we did it, we need to convert the strings to integers. And we do it like this. We declare new integer variables and use the parse method of int. All right, let's do the same with the second number. All right, and now let's ask the user for the operation to run on these two numbers. Let's type the operation and let's give him the options. So it will be plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulo. All right, and let's call this string operation. Okay, now, as we've seen before, the switch statement starts with the keyword switch, and then we give it the variable that we want to compare with different values. All right, and this is the operation that we got from the user. All right. And the first case will be, of course, plus, and as you can see, I'm just using the keyword case and then the value. All right. Now we are going to do the following. First, let's add a break in the end, and we'll write our commands in between. All right, so since our program is pretty simple, I am going just to print the result directly inside the case. All right. And now we need to do the following. num1, num2. Okay. Now I'll copy and paste this just to save some time. All right, minus, multiply, divide, and modulo. So this is simple, but when working on divide and modulo, there is a potential problem here. But all right, let's start like this, and then we'll see the problem and we are going to fix it. All right. Now, as I explained in the theoretical part, we should have a default option. Well, it's not a must, but recommended. And in the default option, we are going just to tell the user that that the operation that he typed is unknown. All right. And now let's try running this program. Okay. So let's type, for example, 1 for the first number, 2 for the second number, and we are going to choose plus. And as you can see, the result is printed here. All right. Now let's try to type an operation that doesn't exist. For example, I'm going to choose something, I don't know, just an ampersand sign. And as you can see, we are getting unknown operation. So if we're looking at the switch statement, since none of the cases matched, we went into the default case. All right. Now I would like to try the following. Let's run the program again. But this time I'm going to type 2 for the first number, and for the second number I'm going to type 0. And then, as you already might have guessed, I'm going to divide. Now, as you can see, we are getting an exception. Divide by 0 exception. And this is simply because we can't divide by 0. And this is relevant to both divide and modulo, since modulo is also is the remainder of the division, so we anyway try to divide. So what we need to do to prevent this error, we actually need to check if the second number is 0, and in case it's 0, we need to tell the user can't divide by 0 or something like that. All right, so in the divide case, I'm going to check num2. If num2 equals 0, we are going to tell the user cannot divide by 0. Else, we will divide. Now we need to do the same with modulo. Okay. And that's how it looks like. All right, now let's try to run it and see if it's working. Okay, so let's begin with the same that we did before, 2 and 0, and divide. And as you can see, this time we are not getting an exception, but a nice error message saying cannot divide by 0. Okay, let's try to run again. This time I'm going to do 5 and 2. And again, let's try to divide and see that this is actually the result of the division. Yes, we are getting 2 because it is an integer division. And if we want to get the remainder of the division, we need to run the modulo operation. As you can see, the modulo is 1. Again, let's take a look at what we did. So first, we asked the user for two numbers, then we asked him for the operation, and then we started the switch statement. And we compare the operation that the user selected with every value, actually, with every case. And depending on the case selected, we are going to run the commands of that case. In the end of every case, we have a break keyword to exit from the switch. Also, as you remember, we have the default case, which means if operation did not match any of these cases, we simply get into the default case and run its commands. This was a short and I would say simple lesson in which we learned about the switch statement. Later you will see that using switch is very common. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lesson.